Well, welcome everyone, and welcome to another Thornton. Well, I keep calling them Thornton seminars, but we're not Thornton anymore. We should change them to Exton or Faculty of Science and Engineering seminars. But we're very grateful today to have Alexis Fernández with us today from the University of León. Am I pronouncing that right, Alexis?
Yeah.
León.
León.
Yeah.
León
in Spain. So yeah, without any further ado, I'll hand over to León. I'll hand over to Alexis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for your attending today. First of all, I would like to thank the University of Chester for this opportunity to give this talk during my stay here. I'm Alexis. I'm a PhD student from the Robotics Research Group of the University of León in Spain. So the purpose of this session is to briefly introduce our research group and talk about how to use haptics in virtual reality. So I am going to start by talking about León. It is a province in the northern Spain, and its capital is the city of León. It is a small city with a population of around 125,000 inhabitants, and its university has more than 12,000 students, split it into two campuses. This picture is from the School of Industrial and Computer Engineering. And the building below is the Cybernetics Research Module, and is where the Robotics Research Group is located. The research group was created in 2009, and it is focused on developing software for robots. It began to compete in the RoboCup with the IVO, the Robotics DOS you can see in the left, and then with now the robots you can see in the right. Oh. Then we started to work with bigger robots. Mirabot is the only robot that has been built from scratch in the group. It is based on a Roomba vacuum base. Then we have the body with Kinect cameras for capturing the environment, and display on the top, and very, very small arm in the body. The next one is Karen. Karen was built by a startup from the University of Extremadura in Spain. And it follows the same schema as the previous robot, with a mobile base, a body with two arms in this case, and the display in the top. But it is very, very basic. The next one is the Orbi-1. It is our main robot, and it was built by Robotnik company, a Spanish company from Valencia. And this robot is the one that we have been using in competitions for years. The schema is the same. It has also a laser in the base. In the body, it has a more powerful arm and integrated cameras in the head. The next one is Tiago. This one is the evolution of the previous one, the Orbi-1. This model was built by PAL Robotics in Barcelona, and it is currently one of the most widely models used, most widely used models in competitions. We received it not so long ago, so we are starting our development with this model. Then we also have Baxter. it is our biggest robot, built by iRobot in the United States. And it is mostly used in repetitive tasks, such as in factories. In fact, car manufacturers use it in their factories. This one doesn't have a mobile base, so it cannot move on its own. We also have two peppers, and they are almost humanoid robots, and they have a friendly look, and they can talk with people out of the box, so they are great interacting with people visiting our lab and kids. But they are less powerful than our competition robots, and their hands can barely grab an empty can of Coke, so not very useful for competitions. And the last one is Unit 3A1, our robotic dog and our lab acquisition. We can use this dog in the street, so it is fun and it attracts people attention. And you are probably thinking why we didn't buy a Spot from Boston Dynamics, and the main reason is the price. While Spot is around 70,000 US dollars per year, Unit 3A1 is around 14,000 US dollars in a single payment. So lots of more cheaper. And this is our flat, where we developed and try our robots, and where competitions are held too. It has like a kitchen, a small living room, bathroom, and bedroom. So we simulate a real environment, but with smaller walls, as you can see. We also work with haptics because they are like small robots, and they have also motors, sensors, and actuators, so like small robots. And we have in the group some touch devices from 3D Systems. We have one Touch X device, also from 3D Systems, and one Force Dimension Omega 3. We also have some VR headsets like Oculus Rift, Oculus Quest 2. And our best VR headset is the HTC Pro I with e-tracking capabilities, so we can track the gaze of the user with this headset. Besides these topics, some members of the group also do the research and work in fields like cybersecurity for robots, computer vision, social robotics, augmented reality, haptic teleoperation. So in the group, we do a lot of things. So my PhD is about using haptics as the previous ones in VR experiences. So let's focus on virtual reality. And what's virtual reality? Well, we understand by virtual reality those environments in which users experience high levels of immersion, so as they are in the physical world. So the higher the level of immersion, the best virtual reality experience will be. When we talk about virtual reality nowadays, we usually think in VR headsets like the Oculus or this one from PlayStation. But initially, there were visualization systems based on projections onto walls too, and on projections onto walls, and that's also virtual reality because it has some immersion. So how can immersion be achieved in these systems? Well, mainly making our senses believe that we are in the real world rather than in a simulated or virtual world. And usually we address to the senses of sight and hearing to do so because we are used to visualize scenes in displays and hearing sounds through speakers or headphones. So this is the easiest way of achieve this immersion. So for that, head-mounted displays are perfect. They offer stereoscopic visualization, and the perspective is updated as users move their head, so just as in the real world. And many models include also headphones and speakers, or all speakers, sorry. And what about the other senses? Well, taste and smell are hard to include in VR experiences, even though some research and some prototypes have been developed. Uh, but that's not the case of the sense of touch. The sense of touch is somehow included in VR through the use of VR controllers because they vibrate when we perform some action, but the haptic feedback is very limited. And this is where haptic devices come into play. So what are haptic devices? Well, I like to use the following statement from one of my colleagues in the group to define haptic devices. And it says that haptic devices are to the sense of touch what screens are to the sense of sight. So basically, these devices allow us to touch virtual elements as displays allow us to touch, to see virtual objects in the display. We can classify the haptic devices into two types. The first one, tactile haptic devices, stimulate the receptors we have on our skin, using for that vibrations, air, or ultrasound. So basically with them we can feel pressure, temperature, and some textures. We can find these tactile haptic devices in smartphones, for example, while typing, in VR controllers, and in other devices, in this case with ultrasound or air, to provide this feedback, this tactile feedback. And on the other hand, force feedback haptic devices transmit forces. So they stimulate our joints and our proprioception. And we can use them to feel weights, shapes, hardness, or textures. And these ones are superior to the tactile ones in terms of fidelity. There are also two types of force feedback haptic devices. The first one is wearables haptic device, wearables force feedback haptic devices. And wearables like gloves, you can see in the picture, are still under development, and there are only one or two models commercially available, and at a very high prices. And the other type of force feedback devices are desktop ones. And with force feedback desktop haptic devices, we can buy one of them from around £2,000, and they also have some other advantages over wearables, like the force they can provide, its resolution, and that we don't need to carry heavy devices on our hand. But they also have some disadvantages, and the main limitation of these devices is the size of its workspace. The workspace of these devices is limited by the length of its arms by design, and therefore we cannot use them for interacting with anything outside the workspace. So here we have a clear problem for using these devices in limitless VR experiences. So in order to be able to use these devices in VR, we need to apply an interaction technique. And the most basic interaction techniques used in haptics have been imported from the desktop. And the simplest one is scaling, direct mapping, control display game is the same. And it consists on scale small movements of the stylus in the haptic device itself to bigger movements of the avatar in the virtual world. So we usually select a scale factor that allow us to interact with all the objects in the scene. And it has some advantages. It is really, really easy to implement and very easy to learn. But the accuracy is reduced drastically as the scale factor increases. Because, for example, if we select a scale factor of 5, it means that 1 centimeter movement in the physical world with the stylus will be translated to 5 centimeters movement in the virtual world. So that's not very accurate. The next interaction technique imported from the desktop is the clutching technique. And the idea behind this technique is similar to the way we use a mouse on the desktop. So, for example, if we cannot reach the close button in the corner of the screen with a single movement, we lift the mouse up and we reposition it in the middle of the mouse pad, and then we continue with the movement towards the corner of the screen. And we can do that in the haptic, for example, blocking the movement of the stylus, of the virtual representation of the stylus, while, for example, we click a button. So we can click a button, reposition in the center of the workspace, and then we can continue with the movement with the haptic. The advantages of this technique are that it is relatively easy to implement, and it allows you to reach any part of the scene with good level of accuracy, because we usually apply 1 scale factor in this technique. But however, many movements may be needed to reach a particular point of the scene, and users may need some training to use it well. There are also some techniques especially designed for force feedback haptic devices, such as the bubble technique. This technique is based on splitting the workspace into 2 zones. We have a bubble in the center of the workspace, and then we have the rest of the workspace. Within the bubble, you can interact with all the elements there. And we can move the bubble in the scene by pushing the surface of the bubble towards the direction we want to move it. So we are moving the bubble like if we are using a joystick. And this technique is easy to learn and easy to use, and we can interact with any point of the scene. However, reaching this standpoint can consume a lot of time. It can be slow, and the repositioning task can be inaccurate because when we are moving the bubble, there is an elastic force, an artificial elastic force. So it can distort the user's perception when when haptically interacting with the elements in the scene. The next technique, and thanks to e-trackers, we have this technique called gaze switching workspace. And in this technique, the workspace is teleported to the object, in which the user fixes its gaze. So to avoid unwanted movement, the trigger for the teleport should be doing when the haptic is in the reset position. And in this technique, a scale factor of 4 is applied, so we can interact with objects up to 4 times the size of the workspace. So the advantages of this technique is that it is really easy to use because you only have to use your gaze. And it allows you to reach any object in the scene with your gaze. But the main drawback of this technique is that we need special tracking hardware to implement it. And it is expensive nowadays. Besides, I have a question about this technique and what happens if the avatar falls inside the object after the teleport? That's something we have to take care. So to solve these problems, we started to think about a new interaction technique, and our aim was a technique that would allow to use force feedback desktop haptic devices as main interaction mechanisms in virtual reality experiences, but in a natural way. And first, we developed a technique for traditional displays, and we call it Haptic Zoom. And the main idea behind Haptic Zoom is to apply depth mapping, so the first technique we saw, allowing to reach any point of the scene that it is currently being visualized in the display. But besides this, the user can perform zooms, amplifications to the scene in or out, zoom in or out in the scene. And each amplification is followed by a workspace remapping. So we can do visual amplifications and haptic amplifications too. And the key point of Haptic Zoom technique is that the remapping is performed while we maintain the position of the avatar, of the virtual representation of the stylus. So neither the avatar nor the stylus moves during the zoom. In this picture, we can see in the top, we can see the avatar in the mouth. And once we perform the amplifications in the picture below, we can see that the avatar is in the exact same location as in the previous picture. This technique was patented in Spain Patents Office in 2020. So the next step was to improve the idea behind Haptic Zoom, developing a technique designed for its use in VR. So we have called this technique haptic reality. And it is based on drawing a 3D representation of the workspace in the VR scene. And we call this representation action area. And by default, a scale factor of 1 is applied between the stylus movement and the avatar movement within the action area. So the accuracy is good. But the users can only interact with those objects within the action area in the default mode. The default mode is the interaction mode. But what can we do in the interaction mode? Well, we can change the size of the action area, increasing or decreasing the scale factor is the same. But the key point here is that we do it while we keep the avatar in the same position. So here we are applying the same idea behind Haptic Zoom. As you can see in the animation on the top, we can modify it, and the red dot representing the avatar remains in the same position. And in the interaction mode, remember, it's the default mode. We can also switch to relocation mode. And within the relocation mode, the action area can be moved anywhere in the scene because it is linked to the user's field of view. So wearing the VR headset, the action area is linked to the movement, and with movements of the head, the action area is also moved in the scene. In this mode, the distance to the action area can be also modified, and with the combination of these two animations you are seeing now, we can relocate and reposition the action area anywhere in the scene. So we can interact with all the elements in the scene with a good level of accuracy. Recently, this technique has been implemented within an existing paramedic simulator called ParaVR. And I am going to show you a video demonstrating the use of this technique in the simulator. So here we have the scene, and we have the patient on the floor. That blue box is the representation, that the action area. So I can move the avatar, in this case the hand, within the action area, and we can reposition the action area in the chest of the patient to interact with the chest. So I am touching it, and now I can change the tool to this swab cotton tool to clean the chest of the patient before the insertion. I can now select the anesthesia needle tool, fix the workspace again, and interact with the chest of the patient, in this case performing the insertion for the anesthesia. And we can select the final tool, the catheter tool. It is called Russell Pneumofix tool. We can toggle the skin transparent to see the insertion better and perform it. So once the catheter is in position, we can decouple the needle and the catheter and extract the needle, and the procedure is finished. Okay. Okay. So we have presented this simulator to several paramedics of the Northwest Ambulance Service, and we have received good feedback from them, taking into account that all of them were new in the use of VR and haptics. We have also improved key points of the interaction following the comments of the paramedics. And before I finish, I would like to thank Nigel for the opportunity he has given me to test my interaction technique in his ParaVR simulator. So thank you, Nigel. And that's all. Thank you for your attention, and I'll be happy to answer your questions now.
Perhaps I'll come straight in now, Alexis. First of all, it's far better to experience the haptics that Alexis has been talking about. And Alexis is here until the end of this month. And if any of you would like to try out what he's been showing you, particularly the final paramedic simulator, you'd be welcome to come along and give it a go. And you can take my word for it, it's much better to do it yourself than watch it on a video.
Yeah, it's something you have to try to understand it well. Sorry.
Yeah. So you can email Alexis or myself if you would like to have a demonstration of it live, and you're welcome to do that. So I just have one question for you, Alexis. Now, you talked a lot about accuracy and a trade-off with using the haptic device and the accuracy that you get. But what do you consider to be an acceptable level of accuracy in terms of millimeters?
I think the closer to the one-to-one mapping, the better the accuracy will be. So the key point here is it depends on the task, because, for example, in medical tasks like this simulator, they have to perform the procedure as they do in the reality. So we need the movement to be closer to the reality as possible. But for example, if we apply this technique for robot teleoperation, we can increase the scale factor to allow to interact with all the workspace of the robot with good level of accuracy.
Yeah. And with the TouchX device, do you know how accurate it is? If you're on a one-to-one scale, is it a millimeter accuracy, or is it like 5 millimeter distance in terms of accuracy, or more or less?
It will depend also on the simulator itself, how well you are able to represent the reality. So I think I don't know the exact resolution of the TouchX or Touch device, but they are pretty good, because you can feel the texture over a surface. But it will depend on how well you are able to represent the reality.
Okay, thanks. I guess okay. One final question from me is then. I think having haptics and force feedback in virtual reality is really essential. And what do you see as the immediate future of the technology that's available for haptics in VR? Because there are limitations with the TouchX and similar devices. Are they going to be improved, or is something new going to come along?
With the current devices in market, I think we can do many things, but yeah, we have to think well what kind of tasks we are addressing, because for some of them the limitations of these devices, not only the workspaces but the degrees of freedom, output degrees of freedom are a limitation. For example, in this simulator, we found that once we perform the insertion of the needle, there's no feedback for turning the needle once in the body of the patient. So that's a limitation, because when you are doing the procedure in a real patient, you cannot move the needle in that way. But yeah, that's a limitation of the technology nowadays. But yeah, probably in the future we will have better haptic devices with 6 degrees of freedom both for input and output, and that would be great for
this now, but they're very, very expensive. Yeah.
Yeah.